Part 3, Shadowy Past. 14 years ago, Ken and other senior Irrational staff worked on Looking Glass Studios' Thief: The Dark Project, a seminal first-person sneaker featuring gameplay inspired in part by submarine simulators.
Paul Narath came in, who is the co-founder of Looking Glass.
Creative director Ken Levine.
In that quiet Paul Narath way, why don't you guys, make a game about a thief? And I was like, okay, a thief, cool. And Thief is a film noir, right? Garrett's essentially like a Marlowe-esque private detective who does sort of shady work and doesn't care about anybody but himself, does his thing, wants to be left alone. And this beautiful woman shows up off the street and offers him a job. And of course, that job is way more dangerous and way more involved and involves a lot more shady things than he's let on. And he ends up paying the price for his naivete by losing his eye. And I wanted him to be motivated by self-interest because I thought, as a character I could relate to more than some muscle-bound, not that I'm not muscle-bound, but, a muscle-bound heroic figure.
Yeah, I think what it did was use the backdrop of an epic, but didn't try to tell an epic.
Art director Nate Wells.
I think that's still one of the greatest mistakes that games make is they go out and set down all the, like you would say, the proper names, and then proceed to show you, the conflict at like a kingdom versus kingdom level, where what you have to do is just set that in the back and then tell the story of one character, tell the low-level story.
When Paul came up with that idea for a thief game and then naturally became a stealth game, we looked at, there's a flight simulator called F-117 Stealth Fighter and some submarine games, which were the closest things at the time because they were games where when you were hidden, you were quite powerful. And when you were exposed, you were quite weak. And those games, we used to talk a lot about active stealth. There were things that you could do in those games like drop flares or move through thermocline layers in a sub-game. We knew we wanted the player to be actively be able to do things to enhance their stealth. That's where the noise arrow came from. We had, the moss arrows, how much
water arrow put out.
Water arrow put out the lights, and all those things sort of came into play because we knew we just didn't want the player sitting there waiting till the enemy walked by, which I think is, still, even with Thief, with all the work we did, it's still a problem of that genre. There's still sort of a lot of passivity in the genre. But we tried, at least conceptually, to deal with some of those problems.
I may not be speaking for the mainstream gamer here, but for me,
Game designer Alex Kay.
That passivity was a brilliant innovation in game design. Thief had some of the most tense moments I've ever experienced doing nothing.
Yeah.
Just waiting to see whether I was hidden enough for that guard to not notice me when he passed right in front of my face.
Well, the key is with that is always scaling that experience so it is just long enough to hold the narrative tension, but not so long that you're camping. Mm-hmm. And Thief maybe achieved that inadvertently or through great tuning. I don't really remember. But if you ran and hid in a shadow, it was about the appropriate time. You weren't waiting for massive cooldowns from the guards.
One of the things that Thief really got amazingly right, and I'm surprised more games don't do, especially shooters that have a stealth level are infamous for this, is Thief had extremely fuzzy and soft failure modes. If a guard saw you, it was not game over, restart the level, load a save game. It was, how do I cope with this situation? And I have tools to cope with it. I can hide, I can distract him, I can possibly kill him, although that's hard and sometimes forbidden. Whereas a lot of other games that followed and wanted to do some sort of stealth thing were like, if anyone sees you for 1 micron, reload the level.
Doug and I always talked about, it would be great if you were playing a game, and instead of seeing an enemy and having that enemy immediately attack you, which you had basically seen in almost every video game ever made before, if the enemy said things like, hey, is somebody there? And that was an idea that we kept, because it was the strongest idea. It was the idea that had the most legs. And that idea permeated through Thief in some way because it became a game about that ambiguity of the enemy's awareness of you, which is something that hadn't really been experimented a ton on.
Not only was that our probably strongest idea, but
Game designer Dorian Hart.
It was only when we finally realized that wasn't just a good idea, but the good idea, that Thief actually became the game it was, only months out from release.
I love to see the characters realize the way Rob drew them.
Artist Rob Waters.
I remember Greg LaPiccolo coming to me, and I think my restriction was 160 polygons or something ridiculous. And maybe it was 200. and then at the last hour, like Greg comes around and says they had to be like 100 polygons. and so I'm like just scrutinizing these things and collapsing, like,
For comparison's sake, what's a character in BioShock approximately?
7,000 or 8,000.
yeah.
I'd love to see your concepts, Rob, translated into like 7,000 polygon characters, like someday. Well, I guess we're doing Thief 4 now, so maybe we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see.
I hope they resurrect my character.
Oh, who were you again?
I was Keeper Artemis for the first 3 games, and then they
So
killed
they didn't actually give you a name until the third one. I
I think it was in the second one. I thought maybe not.
So you,
Maybe it was still
so you got an agent, and they forced him to give you.
I got yes, and then I finally was working for Scale. That was nice. But yeah, they killed me. They assassinated him.
Do one of his lines.
Okay, I don't remember. I'll do the first piece of audio you hear at Thief, which is, "Where are you going, boy?" And it's funny, the direction I remember Eric gave me was like, well, it needs to be aristocratic, but it can't be British because we don't want to go down that road. He's like, kind of like Kelsey Grammer. And like, so basically Frasier's voice. The voice is essentially, it's like American aristocracy. It's kind of funny.
I think the fact that it's the first game I worked on with all you guys, and here we are, I don't know, what is it, how many?
27 years
14
later.
years later, still working together. And there's still a lot of similarities, I think, in terms of what we try to do, the kind of games we make, and, that they're first-person games, that they're games that involve non-traditional FPS systems.
And not always knowing if things will work.
Not always, yeah.
Well, seriously, I mean, I think it still is a
Being
big part of our
crazy
process,
ambitious.
is trying anything and being willing to fail, which defined Looking Glass.
Yeah. That willingness to take on risk and failure, eventually I think that's what caused Looking Glass to fail. But I don't think I've ever learned as much in my life as I learned during that year and a half,